Hello, and welcome to Writers Group Therapy.
I'm Tom.
And I'm Rachanee. We're writers helping writers with whatever writing ailments you might have.
Whether it's related to your craft or your career, we can help.
Are you ready for your session?
The doctors are in. Welcome to Writers Group Therapy, and we are back with the amazing not host of the show, Rachanee Lumayno.
What do you mean not host of the show?
Not this episode. Not today. You're not the host today. I'm the host, the solo host.
And I'm in the hot seat.
You're in the hot seat again because, Rachanee, you have another book coming out. The second book, The Heir of Memory and Shadow, the second book in the series Kingdom...
Kingdom Legacy.
Kingdom Legacy.
For shame! You're the editor!
It doesn't say it on the cover anywhere.
It does, actually, on the bottom.
Oh, it does? Okay. My fault.
It's okay.
Anyway, congratulations.
Thank you. And it wouldn't have gotten done without you, so thank you.
I'm a little bit of a biased interviewer, yes, because I had a hand in it. I was very excited. It was really fun. It's a great book. If you read the first book, then you should definitely pick this up because it's much more fun in the world of the kingdoms, whatever.
The Gifted Lands.
So congratulations. The Gifted Lands, yes. Right. Yeah, I read the books and edited them, and I don't remember anything about them.
It's okay.
Yeah. The Gifted Lands. We're back in the Gifted Lands. So wait, let's go back. Your first book came out when?
Oh my gosh. So I wrote the first book in the beginning of the pandemic. So March, April, May 2020. And it came out March 2021. And I started writing the second book pretty much right away. I wanted it to release in December, but life got in the way. And so
still, it's only been a year. It's not bad.
I mean, I was hoping to have a shorter production schedule, but it just life. Yeah. So it came out May 3rd.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm not going to go into plot. People can read about it online. We'll put links to it and everything online. You can read it on Amazon or wherever, all the different places it is. But let's talk about writing it because, this is great. You cranked out 2 books in a short time. But what did you learn between writing the first book and the second book? And how did that affect your writing of the second book?
Oh, my gosh. Well, I think, and you would know because you edited both books, I believe I had 17 drafts of book 1. And I was better this time. I only had 5 drafts for book 2. So I must have learned something. It's funny, I'm still not an outliner. Outlining scares the crap out of me. And so this book is still very much, if this happens, how do they react? Then what? And there were, I know the first drafts, both you and Jamie, who also read early drafts of the book, you guys were like, what is with all the buckets? And when you guys read the book, you'll understand what I'm talking about. It comes in the middle. And you guys were just like, can we stop talking about buckets already? And I'm like, sorry. So there was a lot of fine tuning that had to happen because I didn't plot things out in advance. But maybe because I was going back to the same, it's not quite the same characters, but I was going back to the same area. I was going back to the same world. That made it a little easier. And I felt like I knew more of how to connect the dots quicker. So there was less. Okay. I know you still gave me plot notes, but I think even after you read the first 2 drafts, you were like, you got to those connect the dots for the plots quicker than in the first book.
Oh yeah, definitely. You definitely, from beginning to end, the story was there. It was there, and it was just, there were a few, what's going on here kind of things, just to kind of little sidetracks and a little bit of logic, thinking things through. But that's only something you could do after you wrote it. You'd only be able to see that after it was written.
Yeah.
Did it go faster? I don't know what the time frame was. I know you had some issues come up during the writing of the second one, so I don't know if you can actually apples to apples look at how long it took to write each book because
of that. Yeah. So the interesting challenge on this book, so I think, let me think about this. When I wrote the first book, I want to say, when did I give you the first draft of the first book? I think it was like by the end of the summer, right?
You kept threatening to give it to me, and then it took like 2 more months, I think.
Yeah, it took a lot longer than I anticipated. So let's say it was like 6 months maximum to get you the first draft of book 1. And that was with me writing fairly continuously. I might put the book down for, like, a day or 2 or 3, but I was picking it up constantly. Interestingly enough, with book 2, I was writing fairly steadily, and then my mom had a health scare, and that derailed me for about 2 to 3 months. And when I picked the
Mhm.
book back up, it was about, late September, October. So the health scare happened in July. I was able to work on it again by, like, the fall, and I don't know if other writers do this. I don't necessarily go back and read what I've written because that's a lot of words. I just kind of remember where I was at last. And so I think that's where the unevenness happened, was because I had put it down for so long. If I had
Ah.
just put it down for, like, a few days, I would have remembered where I was in the thread, but because it had been
Yeah.
so long, I was like, "Whatever, we'll just keep going." And then you and Jamie were both like, "Ugh, what happened here?" And I'm like, "Hiatus," you know? So that might
Yeah.
have made a difference, to be honest.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, the story, like you said, is set in the same world as book 1, but and it has a couple characters that we know, but it's all different characters. So it's not a series in the traditional sense where your main character is the same throughout, but it's more of the world is the same throughout. Is that you always planned it that way? Like, and you always planned this as a series, obviously, right?
Yeah, so that was a deliberate choice on my part. I do love to read. I would think any author also likes to read. Love fantasy, love sci-fi, but I get really annoyed with series just that they just go on forever. Like, some of my favorite series, I've tapped out after, like, book 4, book 7, book 10, because I'm just like, "Okay, we're 25 books in, and the main character has not had any resolution in their personal life." Like, how much more crap can a person go through, you know? It gets
Hmm.
annoying, and I can think of so many series that I loved that started off strong, and I feel like once they hit book 7, book 10, you're just like, "No, just stop," you know? Uh, so I sort of modeled this after the Terry Pratchett Discworld series, which, if you've ever read Discworld, it's huge. I wanna say it's like 50 books or more. It's a very big
Hmm.
series, but it doesn't follow any one main character. I think he's got 4 or 5 groups of main characters that he follows, and it's kind of you don't have to read them in order. It's not like 1 through 5 is these people, 6 through 10 is these people. It's just whenever they show up, in the book series. And so, to me, I like that because you can pick up any book in his Discworld series and understand what's happening, and the characters might allude to a previous book where they were all doing something, but it's very minor, and you can move on without having read 20 books previous. So that's what I wanted to do for this. I wanted something where readers could pick it up at any point in the series and understand what was happening. And yeah, life goes on and people talk about things and people that happened to them in the past, but you don't have to go in and feel like they're all having one big in joke and you missed all of it, because you weren't there from the beginning. So,
Hmm. Yeah, and if you read the first book, two of the supporting characters in the first book continue the same jobs they were doing kind of in the second book for for a different main character.
mhm.
So it kind of gives you that connection, and then they do have references to what happened in the first book, but it's nothing that you would have to like. You have to have read the first book to understand what's going on. It's all very well contained, but I love the fact that it's still in the world. One of the I love reading series too because you don't have to go through that starting from scratch part of reading when you pick up a new novel that's completely new. When you pick up a book, if it takes you a while to get into it, and you're like, oh, I don't know if I like this or not. But when you read a series, you kind of have an expectation. Some things are familiar, but then there are new things as well. So I think that was kind of a nice. Those kinds of series are great, but you've done it a little differently. But the interesting thing is that the main character in book 2, Kiernan, has a similar profession to one of the main characters in the first book, so that carried us through as well.
Mhm.
But you put a nice twist on it, how it's a little bit different, like the seeker profession that we learn about in the first book. That one of the characters is a seeker of dragons, but in this time it's all about love, which is kind of nice. And which brings me to my next question is why did you make the abilities of your seekers? There's actually a family of seekers
Mhm.
to be focused around love.
So, funny story about this. During the pandemic, I started learning to read tarot. And apparently, a lot of authors, I actually saw, I think it was on ISA, a lot of authors use tarot to plot out their books or at least get an idea because it's the hero's journey in card form. If
Hmm.
you've ever looked at a tarot deck, the major arcana is the hero's journey. And as authors, as scriptwriters, we know what the hero's journey is, right? And so
Hmm.
I was laying out the cards for my character, and this is what I came up with that, he was a nobleman and he had a gift that went awry, and it had to do with love. And I already knew I wanted twins, so that's not a spoiler in there. So that also played in, but it was cool to just have like a very small framework and I could just go from there. Like I said, I'm not a huge outliner, but with book 2 I was like I really don't know where to start. And so being able to do that really helped. And apparently Stephen King does it. So if Stephen King can do it, I'm in good company.
Wow, yeah, that's crazy because you have no idea what you're going to get. I've heard of people who have writer's block or are trying to create stories using different kinds of randomized cards or tools to create a story. And here you're using a set of tarot cards, which has its own methodology and practice to it and history. So it's almost like it mystically is telling you what to write. That's kind of creepy itself.
Maybe I should do that for all my outlines. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe I'm gonna write a book, but I'm gonna have a Ouija board write it for me. I'm gonna,
Better than AI, right?
yeah, I
But
just
what
need to find a
happened?
spirit of a writer to do the writing for me. Just
Oh,
one
man.
letter at a time, write an entire novel.
But then you'd have to share royalties beyond the grave, so I don't
Yeah,
know.
I wonder if I can ask the spirit to write in screenplay format though.
Oh, man.
So the Era of Memory and Shadow is going to be available on all kinds of platforms, but you're self-publishing it again, as you did the first book,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
How did that go with the first book? How was that process?
I have learned a lot. I did not know when I self-published my first book, all the things that had to go into it. Little things like formatting. Had to reformat the whole book, the first book. So for the second book, when I wrote the manuscript, I made sure it was already in the formatting it needed to be, so I didn't
Ah,
have to. So
yeah.
I don't remember, I think I sent you the PDF, but when you got it, you were probably like, "Why didn't she indent? Why did she do that?" Because it was ready to format as it
Ah.
was. So, little things like that that save you time, and also promotion, because I didn't realize when I did book 1, with a book, you need a lot of promotional lead time because people have to read it, they have to write reviews, all this stuff. Whereas with a film, it's 2 hours, they can just watch it, like, the week it comes out, write a review, and they're done. So you don't need as much lead time, and I kind of had treated book 1 like I was releasing a film, and it shot me in the foot. It really didn't do anything for
Ah.
me. So when this book was coming out, I decided I wanted they have these things called book tours, virtual book tours. Obviously, pandemic, it's not like anyone's really I think people are beginning to, like, tour physically, but it's very sparse, and I think it's for, like, the big, big authors.
Yeah,
So
where would you go though? There's like hardly any bookstores left to do a
yeah,
tour in.
right? I mean, and I don't even know if bookstores are open because of the pandemic, like, you'd probably have to think about, maybe this has restrictions, but this state doesn't. Like, I don't even know, without extra support. Like, if I had to put a tour together myself, I'd be like, oh my gosh, no. So, I decided to do a virtual book tour and I picked a company that had a month long option for Heir of Memory and Shadow because I wanted that long lead time to do it. And it sort of worked out really well. I went with two different promotional companies and I did a week-long tour for Heir of Amber and Fire in March because that was the one-year anniversary of its release date, and then I
Ah.
went and did the month-long tour for the second book. So it was kinda cool to be able to, like, piggyback on them. It just worked out for the
Mhm.
timing. I
Ah,
didn't plan
okay.
that, but it worked out well.
And what happens what kind of things happen during this tour?
Well, with a tour, it really just depends on who the reviewer is. So it's actually as far as touring, quote unquote touring goes, you as the author have very little what's the word? you don't have to expend a lot of energy. I mean, I know that sounds really horrible, but it's kind of nice. Like, the tour company does everything. They find the reviewers, they make the artwork, they set up the schedule, like, they do everything, and all you have to do, the bare minimum you should do, is when a reviewer says, "Hey, I reviewed your book," is retweet it or post it on your social, shout out to them.
Sure.
That's the bare minimum. Like, with, the tour company I went with for, Amber and Fire, which is called Escapist Tours, and they were amazing. Shout out to Justin, thank you so much. He created some amazing, like, Instagram artwork, so I just made sure to schedule the Instagram quotes that he had created the week before the tour, so people knew it was coming. So, and every tour company is different, like, as far as what they give you for promo materials. That was just, like, a beautiful thing he gave me, was all that artwork and with the pull quotes. So, and I didn't have to do anything with it. Like, he could have made the art and I could have just sat on my thumbs and not done anything, but I wanted to give myself as much visibility as well because they were putting in so much time. You know, I wanted to support them as much as they were
Mhm.
supporting me. So a lot of the blog tour was reviewers blogging on their sites, and then I would retweet it, and then I did do one live interview with a YouTube vlogger, I
Which
guess would be the word.
I watched. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
good.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you for
Mhm.
tuning in. So, that was with
Well, I
Baldy.
didn't tune in live. I had to watch it delayed. Sorry.
I know, and I kept shouting you out too. I was, like, trying to, like, sell your services. But yeah, so that live interview was with, Raw Reads on YouTube, and he was great. So,
I saw one of them, one of the social media posts. They actually animated your book cover, which is so cute. It's like little sparks flying around and stuff. It was
oh, yeah, yeah, and one vlogger on the tour had this really creative idea. You know those, like, choose your own adventure videos that people do where it's like, "If you
uh-huh.
like this, choose video 1. If you like that, choose video 2." So she did a quiz, and we had a lot of fun because since I did the voices, obviously, on the audiobook, I just re-recorded the characters. She gave me a script of what she wanted each character to say, so if you took the quiz, like, at the end of it, like, what the character would say. So I just
Ah.
recorded all the voices for her, and she put that on a
Oh,
video.
cool.
Yeah.
That's
So they
great.
have
So
some
you had a
great
little
ideas.
collaboration there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I know these things are kind of like a slow boil kind of thing, but have you seen a uptick in like followers on social media, or I don't know if you want to talk about book sales or hits on your website? Have you noticed any like results from this?
Yes, to all of them.
Good, great.
It's small, you know, it's not like, you know, crazy viral numbers, and you have to maintain it. I'm not always the best at maintaining, but I have noticed a small uptick in followers, in sales, and in newsletter subscribers. And for me, like, when I went into this, I did a lot of research on these tours. It's not, I mean, it's a bonus if you sell, obviously, but for me, I wanted more visibility because if people don't know who you are, they're not going to buy your books. So, and at least now I have 2 books in my catalog. So if people are like, "Oh, I really like this one," I can check out her other one.
Hmm. And you know, again, you're hoping to get exposure for maybe an actual publisher, or maybe someone trolling, you know, book sites looking for the next IP for their film franchise, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, or I'll write the film myself. If you wanna produce it, I'll write the film myself.
Of course, when I was reading it and editing it, I kept seeing the scenes in my head. I'm like, oh, I know how this scene would look, and so I hope they become films because they'd be really cool as
You
films.
know, it's funny on the tour, we should link it in the show notes, her name is escaping me, um, but the one that I did the voices for, she was like, "Do you have any artwork of the characters?" And I said, "No, but I can imagine, like, who the characters would be if I cast them." And I
Oh
went
yeah.
down the rabbit hole. I had way too much fun casting my own book.
Oh, I'd love to hear that. I have to go back and read that one.
Yeah, I'll find the email, I'll send it to you. It was way too
Yeah.
much fun of casting the characters in my book.
So when are you starting on book 3?
I It's already going. Yeah.
Oh,
I'm
great.
already about
Awesome.
maybe 4,000 words in. I have an idea of where I want it to go. So that's really the biggest thing is I might not know the middle part, but I know what will happen and I know the ending and I just have to get there and connect the dots somehow. So,
Yeah, so as a novelist though now, and being the co-host of a writers podcast and a writers group, Does it feel weird to not be screenwriting as much? Or
You know, it's funny, I'm still pitching scripts. I still am,
yeah,
and I feel like it's a good discipline to go between back and forth because when you write a script, you get to the point, right? The whole joke
hmm,
about, how come in American cinema, they don't say hello, they just pick up the phone and they're like, Miller or whatever. Like they, as opposed to like in real life when you pick up the phone, you're like, "Hey, this is Johnny Miller. What's up?" So it's interesting. It's definitely a different discipline. It forces me as a novelist to be the cinematographer and the actor and the writer. Cinematographer and like, what does it look like? That's something you drilled into me, right? You'd be like, describe the characters, describe the scene. Because I wasn't doing it because I was so used to relying on somebody else in a script.
right,
Or, as the actor, okay, what happens to the character here? How do they react to this thing? And then, of course, the craft of writing. So it's forcing me to use different hats, which is nice. I mean, I don't know. Writing's writing, right?
yeah. I don't know. I guess I think they're kind of very different.
They are different, but it's good sometimes to use your
The
brain like
idea
that.
of when you talk to novelists and they talk about writing 50,000 words, I'm like, wow, I can't even get, 100 pages, that have a couple hundred words on them done. It seems like a daunting task. So I give you lots of credit for that. I think it's fantastic. Do you prefer one or the other? Have you found one being more fulfilling than the other since you've done both?
I think the nice thing about writing a novel is that it really is all on me. Like, it's daunting and it's nice in the fact that, like, I don't have to try to, like, incorporate a bazillion people's notes into it or worry about a budget or worry about locations, so that is nice in that sense that I can just write whatever I want.
Hmm.
But I do love the collaboration of screenwriting and, like, seeing it on film and working with, your director or your DP or your actors. And again, sorry, I just realized, so going back to your other question about just using the different parts of my brain. One reviewer actually made a comment about how I kept talking about things that like you could imply that they were happening off page, like them eating or something. I forgot. I have to look at the thing. It wasn't a bad review. They just commented about like I described things a little too much as like, and now they're picking up a spoon or whatever. And I thought that's me being a cinematographer because I felt like I
Ah,
had to explain what you were seeing on camera every moment. Instead of just, like,
ah.
assuming that you knew that they were doing that thing, and I thought that was
Hmm.
really funny. It kind of clicked something in my head like, "Oh, maybe I don't need to explain everything. Okay,"
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, I have to definitely, definitely add all these reviews and all these podcasts and stuff to the show notes so people can go check out, your adventures in book touring. What's next after? Well, I guess we got book three you're going to be working on, but what else are you working on? Anything else exciting coming up?
Book 3, book 4 I have ideas for. I've got ideas for a duology, working on some script pitches, and yeah, I think that'll carry me through the end of the year.
Yeah. Are you playing any D&D? Because didn't some of this come out of your D&D experience too?
Book 1 did, yeah, I'm still playing,
Yeah.
still doing that. I wrote a one-shot for the first book as a tie-in. I might do the same for the second, I'm not sure. I It's not hard to write a one-shot, it's the game mechanics that kind of were hard for me because I'm not as strong in game mechanics as I am in,
Uh,
like, the storytelling.
for
The
those of us for those of us who aren't D&D nerds, what's a one shot?
Oh, I'm sorry, a one-shot is basically it's like okay, so when you play, you can either do what is called a homebrew, where you're basically improving the whole campaign, or you can
Ah,
play off a written game module, which like has the story outline, and it doesn't say like it gives you room to improvise, but it basically outlines like here's who you're meeting, and here's the land, and here's the troubles, and
ah,
so it makes it easier for people to get into it because they don't have to imagine everything off the top of their head.
gotcha.
And so I wrote a tie-in that was set kind of in between book 1 and 2. So it assumes you know what happens at the end of book 1, but it's not a deal breaker if you don't. And
Okay.
yeah, but the game mechanics of like is this role okay here? Like, that was what tripped me up. But, like, the story itself, I'm like, this is
That's
easy.
cool. I
Yeah.
know I know we've talked about developing games before, but that's like really cool that you and with D&D, the game exists, the mechanics exist, so you just have to know how to write for that.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
you can maybe the I was going to say maybe it'll be one of those pages in the back of your book that talks about get the D. Remember at the back of this is funny. Remember at the back of books when they had those promotional pages?
Oh my gosh, yeah, like, rip this
I
page out
haven't
and
picked up
mail
a
it
book in
in.
I haven't picked up a physical book in so long. It's like, but yeah, they used to have like promotions for future books or other series and stuff like
Mhm.
that. It seems like that would be something that would be at the end of your book would be download the game one shot or whatever for D&D players.
And you know what's funny is that one shot, I wrote it so Justin, who did my first tour, he suggested, "Why don't you do a D&D one shot as a tie-in because, like, your book came out of that." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that's a brilliant idea." And I wrote it in, like, a week. And that was
Ah.
really daunting. I wrote it in a week. I had a friend who's a better dungeon master than me look it over, and we play tested it really quickly. But, like, the actual, like, basic framework of it, I was just, like, staying up until, like, 1 in the morning, typing it out to just because I was on deadline. I was like, "I need to get this off my plate."
Mhm.
So it was funny. Writing under
Cool.
deadline, best way to write.
Yes. I always write better under deadlines.
Mhm.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on your podcast, Rashni.
Thank you, Tom.
You are a wonderful guest. Where can people find you besides here
Oh, you can find me on
and your
Yep,
books?
I'm online. Rachanee.net is my website. You can find me at Rachanee Lumayno, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. Um, I guess we'll spell it RACHANEE.net or RACHANEELUMAYNO. That is also my author name, and that's how you can find me on Amazon. So, Heir of Amber and Fire, Book 1, Heir of Memory and Shadow, Book 2. So all formats are available: Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Kobo, pretty much wherever you buy your books, audiobooks, or ebooks.
Okay, cool. Thanks again, and check out Rashni's books at your favorite digital book place, and follow us on social at WG Therapy on Instagram and Twitter, and writersgrouptherapy.com. And we'll see you next time.